crop within the harvest window, I mean, removing the
Huge
crop,
problem.
certainly, you know, before the harvest date or after the harvest date. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we've done with our inspections with regard to, inspections to ensure that the harvest date was adhered to, so. Some other additional issues, our registrants trying to get inspectors to take lower leaves from the sample and collect leaves and samples for them.
Wow, that's a shame.
What?
And larger acreages planted to higher percent THC genetics. Do you have comments on that?
What does that mean?
Like the larger acreages have higher THC, is that what that means?
Terry included that.
I would say overall, just the number of acres is a bigger number with a higher percentage than we've seen.
So, you know, we're here to talk about what the issues are, but also to, you know, talk about that we are aware of these and that we understand that, you know, and penalty matrix is something that we definitely are gonna have to now really move into it. Quite frankly, we've tried to give the registrants and the industry an opportunity to kind of evolve and grow and to sort of learn. And, you know, and we felt first it was incumbent upon us to make sure that we were providing educational resources, so we tried to make sure that those were available, because we didn't want to be penalizing if we hadn't, you know, made it so that they had the opportunity to understand these things. But at this point, there's a lot of information out there. This program is really ultimately not that complex, and it really is incumbent upon our registrants to be compliant, and if they're not, we're going to have to start moving in this direction of having a penalty matrix, which is typical of any regulatory program. But I just want you to know that's on the horizon. Some law enforcement issues. And Dwayne and Terry and Jessica and I, we all take calls from law enforcement, so we have different kinds of issues that, you know, we deal with. So I would certainly welcome input from any of those that are taking those kinds of calls, and some of these I know that Terry wanted to include. Hemp as a cover growing marijuana in plain sight. Concentrated products, what to do about fields over 1%. Should we, you know, if the test comes back at 1% for one field under that registration, does that necessarily mean you want to go out and now test the rest of those fields under that registration? Law enforcement has a lot of requests for training. We get a lot of requests, you know, that they want to understand this, they want to understand it better, and that there is some confusion. And this is more on the ground level, as opposed to at the cabinet level, where, you know, I think that, you know, there's probably a lot of conversations going on, but I do see that a lot of the officers on the ground are really unclear, and they really do appreciate us taking the time to discuss these things with them. And Terry was teasing me yesterday because I was on the phone with this officer for quite a while, but what he didn't know at the time was there was 4 officers on the phone because they put me on speakerphone because they all wanted to learn, you know, whatever it is that we had to share. So, unregistered hemp, of course, finding trim flower, we had that, you know, those are some issues. Finding large quantities of ground hemp, and then certainly transportation issues. Did anybody have anything they wanted to
Back
add
up
to
to those
this?
findings, what do you mean fire on trim flower?
Terry, you can take those.
Law enforcement calling and saying there's somewhere where people are trimming and they can't take a sample, they confirm what's going on with it. And then cars going down the road, getting pulled over, and they have a carload of trimmed material, and they don't have any paperwork, but they say it's hemp, and they let them go. In this day and age, and they get their address, and they know where they're going, and they follow up on it. The one thing about the 1% is basically on the sheriffs, because that gets turned over to the county sheriff, and then it's just up to the sheriffs to figure out what's going on. And they usually get a hold of their DA, so they don't really have a standing operating procedures. They don't really know what to do with it. And I've said that all along. In the first year, we had the same thing. And what do we do now? I said, well, we just let them know. So it becomes the sheriff and the DA and the county.
I'm gonna add here, Jim, you may jump in as well if I'm out of line. But this is a major topic right now at the cabinet level. We're we're sitting here trying to figure out how are we going to address the movement of and transportation of hemp. How does this happen once it becomes a more agricultural commodity, but how do we make sure that it isn't used as a cover for transportation of hemp, or transportation of marijuana?
Right.
So we have a serious issue that as a leading state, it really is, if this is gonna become a national program, if this is gonna break, we're really in the driver's seat here to try to figure out how to make this work. And I can't tell you how many discussions Jim and I have sat through. Alan has been in some where we've sat and had discussions about, you know, how does this all work, and so that we can all understand. But this is a very serious issue, not just here in Colorado, but on a national scale.
Yeah, maybe I could add that, you know, I appreciate, Dwayne, the invitation to be here today, just to add, you know, one piece of the law enforcement picture here. One thing we could mention is that, the recognition that there's some potential, I mean, this is ultimately about sort of marijuana and hemp convergence, right? And it's about trying to create bright lines, and I think we all agree it's in our shared best interest, both for, you know, obviously I work in the on the commercial marijuana side, but there are clearly issues that we need to create bright lines and make sure we understand the lanes. But I think it's, what we've understood is it's in our shared best interest to make sure we figure this out. And so one other resource that's not here today is the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has recently stood up a new, what they've called the Black Market Team, but they may be looking at this as well. So there's additional resources at the state level to sort of help think through this with you as a team. And so I think these kinds of meetings like this and what you as the Hemp Advisory Committee are doing is critically important to help figure this out before someone figures this out for us, which I think is exactly why I appreciate you all.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch just on something Jim said. It is in our best interest to word these two things. I mean, if this is an industrial hemp industry and not a marijuana light industry, it is up to us to figure this out. And right now, there's a lot of blurring going on. Some of that by intent, I believe. Some of that also by lack of information out there. But it is really up to us to help get in front of this, or this is going to be a serious issue for a very long time. That's what we're finding as a state that's grown rapidly. It is in our face. It will be in other faces, in other states very soon, and they'll figure out a way to do it instead of us taking a leadership role.
Are you seeing other states, Department of Ag, who have done programs, seeing similar issues arising as things from New Jersey?
Yes, and I would tell you, some more complicated than us. I have, in the last couple of weeks, been dealing with New Mexico, and they have a real serious issue because they have federal border police operating in the state, and they can't identify material cannabis at all. So there's, again, we have a big problem because of the size. We have a big problem because honestly, we've had some bad players that probably have tried to take advantage of it. But we don't have some of the issues other states do. But yeah, there's a lot of states. Understand that we've been in it a lot longer than a lot of states. We regulate different. It's been one of the things that some states have, kind of like we do in the marijuana industry, have a seed to sale. Our legislature gave us cultivation, which honestly, I say this to everybody, I know absolutely nothing about processing. We would not want the Department of Ag to do processing. If it's food, that's Jeff, you know? Don't make me repeat what Jeff already knows how to do. I just have to try to hire Jeff.
We had the same one a few years ago, but Dwayne won, so.
So you know, those are the issues that we really do. You know, how we got to where we are as a leading state is different than how some of the next states are coming on. And you know, many of them have spent a lot of time calling and asking, trying to learn to get ahead of where they're at. But as I always tell them, you know, don't copy what we've done, there's a lot of blood in the parking lot. We made a
Yep.
lot of mistakes, learn from those mistakes and step forward, so.
So can a lot of this be fixed with, rule changes, or do we need a lot of legislative changes as well?
I think there will be some that will be legislative and some that will be rule. I don't think it's always one or the other.
A lot of education.
Yep.
Madam Mr. Chair,
Yeah, just speak up here.
Guys, I'm off the table, so I just wanna, no, but I just wanna make it clear though, that we recognize that there are opportunities for both industries to work together. There are clearly some advantages, synergies, reason just the common sense says we need to work together. One that Dwayne brought up is the testing regime, where clearly the General Assembly, and we work together to deliberately blur the lines. And we understand that, and that's fine, as long as we understand exactly how we're doing it, and we're doing it in a deliberate, thoughtful way. And there are gonna continue to be things that we're gonna need to work through. The CPD realm is the place where we clearly have, a lot of work to do to try to figure it out. And I think some of those are clearly the root of what you're looking at when you look at this list of law enforcement issues. So I just want to point out that we're not saying that, I don't think any of us at the state level agencies are saying these bright lines need to be, that these agencies have these very distinct lanes. There are going to be places where we are going to work very closely and collaboratively together. And I think one thing, a clear takeaway is, if you've looked over what these agencies, CDPHE and CDA and DOR, MED, and Department of Public Safety have done particularly over the last year, and trying to come together in a collaborative way, it's been pretty impressive. And when we go out and and we talk to other states, they look to Colorado as a regulatory leader, in part because of that partnership and that collaboration that we have created at the state level. And you all need to be aware of that, because there's a real commitment there to work together, whether it's on a regulatory level, whether it's on a statutory level. But we're working together, working through it, and in this way, of course, with our stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you, I think those are really great insights.
Well, so
Oh, Amy.
would it be helpful for, us to work with Extension or Extension Company? We struggle, universities to develop education programming around this, because it touches on marijuana, but pretty much everything you mentioned here needs, like training people how to vote forms,
Great.
everything here, that's something we could do workshops on. There would be
Yeah, we will take anything.
Okay.
So if
But I
that,
think we can stay legal on everything here.
yeah, and I understand, she's at Colorado State University, so she has, comes from that perspective. Ben?
I think we all know that CBD has been a low-hanging fruit in this industry. Most people are cutting their teeth on those types and that product channel. But has there been any movement into other types? Has fiber become a thing? Has grain become a thing? Are these
Yes.
types happening?
Yes. Slowly. Yeah. Yeah.
So how about if I give you my, Dwayne's gonna take off his regulator hat and put on his economist hat. And as we all said, CBD was the early driver of the industry. Relatively inexpensive to get into a processing, and a high dollar volume value to the end product. And that's changing. And as you have to meet higher standards as the industry improves, that cost of entry gets higher. But initially, that's I think where almost every state has seen where the industry has jumped, where it has come from. As those prices come down, and as this moves to more what I would call traditional farming areas, we see more traditional farmers getting involved, and those traditional farmers have equipment to harvest grain. They know how to grow crops for grain. And quite honestly, corn prices, wheat prices aren't all that good right now. So to find a crop that they can use less water on and grow for grain seems to be gaining interest, not only just in Colorado, I would say in general. We're seeing that now in the industry as we talk among states. I don't see, just Dwayne's opinion, fiber will ever be a driver. It will be a secondary product. It may become increasingly important, but it won't be what people plant largely for. And I'll use the analogy of, we have a lot of cotton in this country, and what do? We harvest it, we bundle it, we don't process it. We pick it on
To
a boat,
China.
we ship it over to Bangladesh or India. I think, doesn't mean there's no cotton produced in the US. I think there'll be some fiber used, there'll be some used for paper, there'll be some used, but I think the volume of fiber products will be a secondary driver, not a primary driver. Dwayne's 2 cents isn't Ed?
You know, like everybody knows, CBD kind of got the industry off the ground. Right now, seed deals are becoming more and more popular across the country. Dual cropping, having a plant that produces a good seed and harvesting fiber is going to become very popular. And now we have hybrid plants where we're harvesting the CBD in the flower, and we're left with a lot of fiber, and it's gonna become more and more popular for the farmers to harvest and bale fiber, bring it to a processing center to be made into so many things. The fabrics industry is gonna be very slow to get off the ground here. It's huge in China and not as huge in Romania and other places, but we're starting to really kick it in the United States in so many different ways. So don't downplay the importance of the fiber, especially for companies like us. That's our main crop that we need to go big with. And if you can imagine what we're all about is transitioning from an oil-based economy to a bio-based economy. You don't get it from the flowers, you don't really get it from the seeds, you get that from the fiber. So we've been doing this for 5 years, but when you look at a 25-year industry, I really think the fiber is going to be a major driver for this international industry.
Why?
In all forms.
Alfonso?
Yes, like for example, my boy and I, we have about 400 pounds of flour that we're going to transport it to Boulder here for extraction. How would you, what do I need? Right now I have the tests, we send it to a lab, we get the testing on it. We have the report, the harvest report, and of course the license from the group. Do I need any more for the law enforcement other than that?
And where were you gonna send it?
What? It's going to come from, say, Alamosa to Boulder for extraction.
Well, at this point, it's a suggestion, to make sure you have your certificate.
Just a certificate?
That's what we have at this point. And, just last week, we got a call and somebody had been stopped, law enforcement, the lights were on at that point, calling us, and it was a good outcome because, I was able to confirm that this was a registered grower who, their registration was active. I was able to see that they had submitted their planting report, so I was able to add that piece of it and say, okay, they're in compliance. And I think that was probably enough for that police officer. Now, what that person was really hauling, of course, I'll never know, but at least I was able to offer that. And I suspect in that case, they just went ahead and let him go, because the person who was driving was also the person it was a company name, but that person was the person who signed the registration. So everything sort of fit, and I think it was a good outcome for that.
I was recommended by a sheriff to bring my registration number. Copy from the CDA of your registration number along with your COA.
Yeah.
Alfonso, what I always tell my clients is have your registration with you.
What's this?
For my clients, I always suggest have your registration, a copy of your registration from the CDA, copy of your harvest report, and if you have a test result, have those.
That's great.
Yeah, those are the three that I
And if you
have.
get pulled over, tell them you have a number to the Department of Agriculture, call and ask the Marine, and then she will help you out.
Yeah, which we do.
I've never had anybody get pulled over.
Just give them the
I had a call last week also, where he couldn't get through to us because we were in a meeting, and he let the person go, and, called me later to see if there was a way that they could preemptively, and we had a little discussion about that's kind of all we can say is have all that with you. And he said that would probably satisfy everybody on his force, but he went ahead and let the guy go because he didn't have anything. He's like, I know how to get a hold of him. While I do my research, I can go track him down again, but he actually even let the guy go without even getting a hold of us, because, and he agreed that most, and I don't remember what city or county it was, but he did say that would probably be sufficient enough for his force. So I think as long as you have stuff to show them, then they'll at least let you go while they do some research.
So, I may pick up Jim again, but, so a couple of things, yeah. Our conversations with law enforcement have been, boy, you know, maybe the best way to tell you is put yourself in their shoes. What information do you have that would give them confidence that what you're shipping is hemp? So if you put yourself in their shoes, the things that Grant just said make perfect sense. The next thing I'll kind of, we have had some interagency meetings, one in Durango, one in the Springs. We're gonna try to do another one in Alamosa that really tries to bring law enforcement in an area to give them what resources that we have. And one of the resources that we always talk to them is there is a active registrant by county. So if they've got a registration number, they can look at it, they can look at the county. It doesn't necessarily mean where the business is, but if they're driving down the road, it doesn't really matter where the business is. They're looking for, can we verify it? So that at times when they can't get a hold of us, they do have some other resources. Part of the burden is still on us to make sure that all law enforcement knows that. And so I gotta thank the folks at DOR, MED, as well as CDPHE and Public Safety that invited us to go down and have an opportunity to interact with law enforcement to make sure that they know what tools are available. Because really, it still is, we're in an education process.
The real issue there is if you're cutting down and you have the wet material and you're moving it, that could be really disastrous, just from an operation perspective. You've already got dry material in your parking for a while, not a big deal, figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, if it got stuck in.
Yeah, and you're sitting there for 5 hours.
Yeah, look, it starts to decarb in the trailer. You open the trailer and you can smell the decarb product in place. It doesn't extract the same.
So those are the issues that we really, we need your input on. How do we do this? I mean, issuing a certificate for transport, there's been some discussion about, boy, do we have a manifest? Well, a manifest is only good until once you get a weight. How do I get you from the field to your stadium, to your weigh station? So we've got a lot of things we've got to get discussing and figured out so that we can give law enforcement assurance.
In 2015, did we run a bill that makes it totally fine to drive hemp down the road within the state? You're totally legal as long as it's industrial hemp, right?
Right.
Okay.
SB 196.
So that part.
But, and some of this is just really sort of visual to them. I mean, I've had a fair number of law enforcement that say, well, there's bars on the windows, and there's lights, and there's security, and yesterday we had that situation, and we said that could still be an industrial hemp grow. The CBD can be, these things can be valuable, so
There's a
just.
story of a robbery that's going around, I haven't confirmed it, but
Did you hear about this?
strong arm, assault rifles.
I talked to Terry about this the day after that. So they claimed that they had put a reward out and the CEA put a reward out for catching this.
Yeah, they did.
When I caught that, I
That
called
may
Terry.
not be true, because we have about $500 in our fund to put out for rewards, so that is not a much
Did
value.
anyone report to the CEA that they had been robbed?
So we can't really go into active cases, but we were contacted from law enforcement, we were contacted multiple times about robberies, hostage situations, any number of things. So, yeah, they're happening.
Okay, yeah, let's do Okay. So, 2017 comparison to other states planted, this is 2017 data. And so, last year, 2017, Colorado was, number one with acres planted at, about 9,900.
Woo.
We don't have any data for 2018, so, we'll have to kind of see how this progresses. Last year, now we're gonna talk a little bit about our inspections, because we're still in compliance. So, last year, just to kind of put this into context, registered acres of sampling was 12,292, and we had 9,890 planted acres. And then, as far as acres selected for inspection sampling, we had 9,213. So that meant that we selected 75%. And then, we had 775 acres that failed. So that was about 7.8% of the percentage of planted acres that failed. And this is just, again, this is just sort of a refresher of the varieties that we saw primarily fail last year. And it was primarily from 2 varieties. And I believe this is, I'm not sure if it's on the website or not, but let's get into where we are now. 2018 active registrations, inspection and sampling. So, in July, when our inspection season really kicks in, we had about 28,758 registered acres, and 56% of those registered acres were selected for inspection and sampling, which is 27% of the registered land areas. And out of that, this year we did something a little different. I think probably everybody's aware of it now, but in the past, we sampled prior to harvest. This year, we added inspecting post-harvest to ensure that registrants actually harvested when they said they would. And if there was crop there, we sampled it. So just to kind of put that in perspective. So we selected, we had 9,100 acres selected for inspection after harvest, and then about 6,900 acres for sampling pre-harvest. And we took either one composite or one variety sample, maybe 2 variety samples depending upon the situation. But that's kind of were our parameters for this year. And then we selected 62 indoor acres selected for inspection and sampling, and that's ongoing because there's a lot of different kinds of rotations and things that are going on. So we want to make sure that we really are inspecting the indoor grows as well, but they're not necessarily on the same cycle, of course, as the outdoor grows. Okay, so right now, and this is, we don't have all of our data in yet. We don't have all of our test results back yet.
Dang,
So
look at the cherry.
we have, let's see, we have failed acres at 741, and we have failed indoor square feet at 30,500. And that was, one of the larger indoor square feet registrations. So to date, the percentage of acres that have failed is to be determined because we don't have all of our test results back yet. But we do have 20 out of 132 samples failed, which is about 15.15%. And 6 of those were above 1.0%.
Do you know which ones?
Well, these are over here is the ones that have the samples, or the varieties that have tested high. So I don't know if you can all see it, I'm not gonna read it to you, but
So
this
you'll
is
say-
where we're at today.
Do you know which one was testing above 1%?
I don't think we included that. Yeah.
It's all right.
The one thing I've got to point out, when you look at that variety list, understand these are varieties. They may or may not be what they labeled them as, they may not be what they actually were. And that may not be the registrant putting down the wrong name, it may be what he believed he bought. But until we get to where we have certified seed, that we have a tracking of a variety, What somebody declares on their planting report is a declaration of either what they want us to believe or what they believe. So I'm gonna pick on one of our advisory committees and a variety that he has up there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, please do explain
So-
that.
Well, thank you for putting that out.
So we have a variety that was developed here in Colorado. Its first year, it always passed. It never failed. The second year, we saw more of that come on, and we saw most of it passed. Almost none of it failed. The longer that variety's been in the marketplace, the more that variety has failed. And I can guarantee you, with as much of that material as we see on planting reports, that material is not coming from the source. So they declare it is the variety that you see up here, when in fact we know that they didn't buy it from the source, and so it's not been controlled, grown in a controlled environment. And so when you look at the variety, and I'll say it, Otto, we know that most of that is truly not Otto in a true variety description.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a fair analogy by?
We sold very little auto this year because, and this is, every seed maker in the system has the same problems, and this goes back, if you read Luther Burbank's biography, it's his biggest problem, is that he sells a seed in a year, and the next year he's competing with copies of his seed. Otto is registered in Nebraska from 3 different seed makers, none of them are me. So it's, you lose control of these varieties because we're a new industry, and because most of these farmers are not farmers, they're people who are just learning how to farm. They're students of farming. They don't understand plant breeder rights. The plant breeder rights haven't really been established for hemp varieties because, one, I'm just trying to keep up with demand, and to go off into that direction is very expensive and it's risky. So what I've learned over the last few years is that all of those cherries came from one man in Denver, a guy named Adam Cooper. And now there are makers, there's one large maker in the state, and I think overall they do an okay job, but their material's been copied so many times to reproduce without a total indiscriminate selection of parents. They're just stealing the name, copying the stuff, and blowing it out for profit. And if I can fix anything, I'd fix that. That's my bugaboo. That's the one that keeps me up at night. So how do you lock down these lines, keep them true, so that you have some responsibility or some oversight as to how they're applied and how they're grown, what the results are.
Call it seed out of the sunshine.
I don't think that that's possible.
Yeah.
When you have any amount of acres of females, and it's a perfectly great seed that you sold them, and pollen can come from hundreds of miles from any kind of cannabis. It can be marijuana, it can be hemp, and you have seeds that are born, and then people have these seeds and they call it something.
Yeah.
And you just cannot control this.
Well, and from one cloning, you have 1 million cuttings in one.
Okay, so we need to kind of keep that within the advisory committee right now, and then we'll be able to have some questions after.
I see MK 2017.
Okay.
That I suspect is MK Ultra or MK, what was it from last year?
Okay.
I have no idea, that's all we know.
The big marquee. Big fit. So how do you get these bad lots? How do we get Colorado rolled out of the system? All due respect, it's just failed me every single year that's been on. How do we get that?
So I'm actually gonna wind this in right now. And we can certainly have the conversations, but we wanna be able to take a break. So let's just finish this up so we can take a break, and we have some rules that we need to go over as well.
Yes.
We'll take a break now.
All right.